Mr. Speaker, it is indeed a privilege to rise for the 31st time in these hallowed chambers to make a presentation, one in respect of budget contribution and also in the State of the Nation debate when I served in the other place for a short period. But indeed in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, this is the 28th time that I'm making a presentation in this office. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to begin by thanking the Almighty God, without whom I would not have had the resounding faith and courage to carry out the fight for the best interests of my constituents and the people of Jamaica on a whole. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to my dear wife, Carmen, of 42 years. 42 years.
Long-suffering woman. Deserves to be a national hero. She needs that deserve a CD.
Who I agree. Yes. Has had her place in heaven prepared. My son, Edmund II, and my two grandchildren. And my wider family, who, Mr. Speaker, several of them are here in the chamber, certainly in the gallery. My constituency secretary of 17 years, Ms. Vinette Stewart, who I really want to commend in this house. My management team that has been with me for 17 years as well. My young team of prospective councillors who are all now set to take their place to serve in the divisions that they supervise. And Mr. Speaker, the special team of ladies who have done yeoman work in East Central St. James that we call Ed's Tulips. Ed's Tulips. So you will appreciate the pun on tulips. Ed's Tulips, that's right. Tulips the flower, and tulips they speak. And they, Mr. Speaker, have carried the work, primarily the social side, particularly with the elderly and the indigent in the constituency, and I want to commend them very specially today. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to the team in the Parliament. And you, particularly, Mr. Speaker, for the even-handedness in which you have managed the affairs of this House. You, over the years, have shown courage. You have shown determination, and you have served this country well, having managed and overcome the vicissitude of this very tedious occupation, avocation that we, as politicians, have sought to take. I wish to acknowledge, of course, our Prime Minister for his strength of fixity of purpose and zealous approach to transformational leadership. Mr. Speaker, some say that the Lord rarely gives people a second chance. But this is my second time at the wicket in tourism. And I wish to make it very clear that we are going to get it right this time. Mr. Speaker, I want, of course, to thank the Supreme Team of supporting agencies, my permanent secretary, the chairman of the boards of the ministry, the chairman of our Tourism Linkage Council, the chairman of the Tourism Competitiveness Committee, the enterprise team for public and private partnership, Mr. Speaker, and the various other volunteers who have come on board to assist us in building out a proper governance structure that will make us move tourism to the next level. Mr. Speaker, I'd like also to congratulate and acknowledge the new president of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association, who is with us today, Mr. Omar Robinson and his team. The diplomatic corps has already been acknowledged, but I particularly want to mention that those who are here represent some of the key markets that we have engaged or are about to engage. And I welcome very specially and recognize His Excellency, the Chinese Ambassador, His Excellency, the Japanese Ambassador, His Excellency, the Cuban Ambassador, and His Excellency, the Mexican Ambassador. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, several other members of international organizations and multilaterals who we have to interface with and who will be central and pivotal to us in building out the new architecture that I will describe during this presentation. I welcome them and appreciate their support. Mr. Speaker, some 1.2 billion people traversed the globe last year from one destination to another, spending in the process $1.3 trillion US dollars, providing 1 in 11 jobs across the globe and contributing some 9% of the world GDP. In our region, Mr. Speaker, tourism represents perhaps the most important economic activity, and last year earned in excess of $27 billion, providing jobs for 1 in every 5 persons, and welcoming some 30 million visitors in our 33 destinations. Mr. Speaker, we in Jamaica welcomed 3.6 million visitors and earned a total of $2.54 billion US dollars. And in the year so far, I think some of those numbers have already been given, we have welcomed just over 1.4 million arrivals, earned just a little over $1 billion US dollars, which represents some 7.6% in terms of the visitor arrival and 5.4% in terms of increase in the expenditure. But today, Mr. Speaker, I want us to examine the tourism landscape a bit and to look at how we have grown, because it is true that tourism is perhaps the only industry that has grown consistently every year, if not every quarter, for the last 3.5 decades. And a cursory glance, Mr. Speaker, at the outturns tell the story. The decade of the 80s, we grew by total visitor arrival of 7.9%. But the stopover element, which is important, we grew by 7.7%. Cruise grew by 11.7%. Direct employment grew by 6.9%. And gross foreign exchange in that period grew by 9.4%. It's important, Mr. Speaker, to examine that, the decade of the 80s. And when we look at the graph, which shows how the growth was distributed across the years, we will see, Mr. Speaker, that the period of the 80s provided a constant movement upward. And in fact, it is felt that you grew cumulatively by over 25% during that period. In the period of the 90s, Mr. Speaker, we grew by 3.8 in terms of the total visitors, and 2.4% for stopover arrivals, and note that, 2.4% for stopover arrivals. Cruise 6.9, and employment, Mr. Speaker, employment grew by 4%, and earnings, of course, by 5.6%. To move very swiftly, Mr. Speaker, because time is of essence, in the period of the 2000, the decade of the 2000, we grew by 2.1% for total arrivals, 3.3% for stopover, and 0.2% for cruise. That was a difficult period for cruise when I believe a lot of redirection was taking place outside of our region. Direct employment, Mr. Speaker, grew by only 1.6%, and foreign gross earnings 3.7%. In the 1 year of 2010, Mr. Speaker, in that year, the recession year, just at the edge of it, we in fact recorded during the period growth that in fact took us 5.0%. It was actually 4.9 plus, but we round it off at 5% growth. And we earned for the first time $2 billion. The period between 2010 and now, Mr. Speaker, the total arrivals was 5.4% growth from 2010 to now. Stopover, 2%. Cruise, Mr. Speaker, was a stellar performance, 11.5%. But, Mr. Speaker, the concern that hits me hard is that direct employment in the accommodation subsector fell by 0.4%, while gross earnings increased by 3.5%. That, I think, has to do with business models and the way in which economies were determined and the room to employment ratio. You would appreciate that that ratio is affected by volume by and large and the business model that is being used. Mr. Speaker, I have brought these numbers to you to indicate that looking at the stopover arrival, which is the essence of our being in tourism, that's the real source of earnings in the industry, we see that the growth averaged somewhere between 2 to 3%. That average growth rate, Mr. Speaker, has proven that it cannot move the needle. It has not generated the jobs that we have asked for, nor has it caused the retention in the economy that we need. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that retention level runs from 15 US cents at the low to 45 US cents at the high. But, Mr. Speaker, tourism has the potential to be the transformation agent of the economy of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, the industry has the capacity to stimulate wide-scale economic activity, fostering new growth in our communities, generating the jobs that we need so badly, and earn billions of dollars in foreign exchange. Mr. Speaker, we are positioning tourism to become a powerful catalyst for improving the socio-economic conditions of our people. Mr. Speaker, nowhere is the transformational impact of tourism in our region seen more clearly than in the Dominican Republic. Mr. Speaker, the DOMREP, if you remember 20 years ago, the same 3.5 decades that we are talking about for growth for us. The DOMREP 3.5 decades ago was an agrarian economy with slow growth and indeed described by many as a poverty-stricken economy. What is the situation through tourism today? Over the last 3 decades, Mr. Speaker, the Dominican Republic has been standing out as one of the fastest growing economies in the Americas, with an average real GDP growth of 5.4% between 1992 and 2014. Today, Mr. Speaker, the DR remains the most rapidly growing economy in the region. Last year, growing by 7.3%. The DR, Mr. Speaker, generates $6.5 billion revenue annually from tourism. And the industry grows at a rate of 7% per annum. It has occupancy rates of over 80%. And they are experiencing a boom now in hotel development and refurbishing, and currently has 70,000 rooms in its room stock. Mr. Speaker, the sustainability measure of the DOMREP tourism is at a very high level because of its ability to absorb the demands that tourism brings to the destination. Their consumption and production patterns have caused the inputs of tourism to be provided essentially by the Dominican Republic themselves. So they have been able to provide the milk and the vegetables. They have been able to provide the construction crew. They have been able to, in fact, they have done so well that they are sending construction crew here to Jamaica to build out our new facilities and to do it in record time. But the important point, Mr. Speaker, is that their ability to convert the wealth that tourism brings has enabled them to have a retention of 70 cents out of the dollar. And that, Mr. Speaker, is the point that I want us to consider as we look at the way forward for tourism. Mr. Speaker, on the basis, no, if you talk about ownership, they have more foreign investors than local, far more than we have in Jamaica. As a matter of fact, because of the absorptive capacity of their economy, they have been able to produce on the inputs, the local inputs required for the satisfaction of the visitor. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to look at how do we move forward with the industry. How do we change the consumption and production patterns in Jamaica to enable us to have a greater retention in the dollar and, in fact, to use the phrase of a friend of mine, to stop sending back the wealth when it comes on the plane or in the ship along with the tourists. So we have to have targets. We have to establish measurable targets, Mr. Speaker. which is perhaps what has been the missing link. Because you can't manage if you can't measure. And that which you can measure, indeed, you can and will manage. So we have established our targets. And we have decided that our target will be to secure 5 million visitors by the year 2021, to earn $5 billion for the industry, to increase the total jobs, which now stands at 88,700, that is jobs from the sector, not the accommodation subsector. The accommodation subsector is at 36,000, but the sector itself is at 88,000, and we want to move that to 125,000 by the year 2021. And to increase the room count by 15,000 new rooms, so that we will be standing somewhere at about 45,000 rooms. Mr. Speaker, we have sat and we have looked at the landscape, and we have developed a strategy to deal with, first of all, the growth side, because the growth is what brings demand. The more tourists that comes to Jamaica, is the stronger the demand for goods and services that they will need. And so we have developed 5 pillars of growth: new markets, new products, new investments, new partnerships,
Prosperity name.
and the renewal of our human capital.
Prosperity name.
And these 5 pillars, Mr. Speaker, will be underscored by 5 networks. And the networks, Mr. Speaker, is the embodiment of the experience that the visitors buy, because that's what they consume, experience. And so you have to provide exceptional experience, not delightful experience, come to mind experience, experience which blows their mind, that will make them want to come and come again. In other words, Mr. Speaker, it is felt that your experience must be opinionated and will craft in the process a conversation that will abide with the tourists whenever they leave the destination.
God and prosperity.
And we did, Mr. Speaker, a test. And we looked at what were the key driving forces, what are the key passion points that drive visitor arrivals. And we wanted to build products around those passion points, because that's how you're going to get the visitor to arrive. And the first critical area that we thought of was gastronomy, food. And we'll discuss them later on, Mr. Speaker. The second one is sports and entertainment. The third is health and wellness. The fourth is shopping. And the fifth, knowledge. Together, Mr. Speaker, that renewed architecture of pillars and network will be enveloped by the need to strengthen and expand linkages with our local agriculture, manufacturing, and the service sector, and importantly, encourage us to aggressively push multi-destination tourism and other innovative responses to the new global tourism realities. And of course, Mr. Speaker, recognizing the gradual rise of Cuba, not in a way to have a knee-jerk reaction, but in a way for collaboration and for sharing, as I will explain later on. New markets, Mr. Speaker. It is estimated that globally, the middle class who have the disposable income to travel will double over the next 20 years. This provides an amazing opportunity, Mr. Speaker, for Jamaica to attract visitors from emerging economies, such as South America, India, China, Africa. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are also the need for new approaches in our legacy markets. That is the United States of America, Canada, the United Kingdom, Western Europe. And I have charged the JTB, Mr. Speaker, led by John Lynch and Paul Pennycook, to move with great expedition to deal with these new markets, but particularly to drive growth out of the legacy markets that we have. One of the concerns that I have had, Mr. Speaker, is how the Canadian market, as a legacy market, has been performing. And I must tell you that in my first iteration, Mr. Speaker, we grew the Canadian market exponentially. We took it at 165,000 visitors, and we left it at 380,000. Through the growth pattern continued, Mr. Speaker, and my friend on the other side took it in 2014 to 415,000. But today, we are down again to 376, and we have to recover the market from where it is gone. And where has it gone? It has gone to our competitors in Mexico, in Damrep, and in Cuba. So, Mr. Speaker, our problem with Canada has been exacerbated a bit by events on the last weekend. And we're not going to be dwelling on that, except to say that come early in July, a team which I will lead will head to Canada to find all our partners and to re-engage that market in a strong and ebullient way to enable a retention of the market we have, but grow back to the levels that we were. Mr. Speaker, we are ramping up also efforts to grow arrivals out of Asia, Latin America, and the Eastern Caribbean, as well as Eastern Europe. Mr. Speaker, Latin America, we're targeting countries such as Colombia, Mexico, Chile, Peru, and indeed Argentina. We are currently in discussion with our travel partners as we seek to refine our strategies and secure adequate airlift. Airlift, as you know, Mr. Speaker, is very central to the movement of our visitors in our destination. As it is often said, they don't swim to Jamaica, so we have to get it right with airlift. Mr. Speaker, in terms of Eastern Europe, visa facilitation is an important part of our strategy in targeting this region. I am pleased to advise that in Latin America, both the former minister and I have worked on getting visa facilitation in that area at a very high level. We want to make sure that that moves into Eastern Caribbean so that Latvia and Estonia and other of those Eastern Europe will also be involved. Mr. Speaker, the truth is that today, the strain of getting visas need no longer obtain. The world is moving in a different direction. And e-visas have become a pattern that is now prevalent, particularly in Asia. India, for example, has developed a very novel model of ensuring that visitors can stay in their homes, go online, answer the questions that are asked, provide the biometric data required, and in 2 seconds, pay whatever the fine is or the fee is, and have printed out a visa that they can move with. That's where, Mr. Speaker, we have to go, because facilitation is everything. We must do everything to make sure that the visitor can arrive in the country in a seamless way. In that context, Mr. Speaker, I have appointed Joseph Fosmeyer as the chairman of the new Tourism Competitiveness Committee. And that committee will look not only on visa facilitations and other types of facilitatory actions at the airport, which is what we call the moment of truth in marketing. The first place that the visitor encounters the destination is the airport. And the process at the airport is an experience. And that experience has also to be a come-to-mind experience. Mr. Speaker, I will now turn to multi-destination tourism. Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that innovations in tourism and innovation in general is defining new models and the new methods of engagement across the globe. And those of us who have not responded to innovation are going to obviously be left behind. And nowhere is innovation more evident than tourism. If you should take a cursory glance at how tourism has evolved over the years and how experiences have evolved over the years, you will recognize that tourism has represented a constant change, a daily change. And in some instances, some people say the only certainty in tourism is uncertainty, because you never know what the new experiences are and how you have to respond to them. So, Mr. Speaker, right here in the Caribbean, we want to provide that game changer. And I'm very pleased to advise that multi-destination tourism, which is the marketing of a variety of experiences and locations under one umbrella, is the architecture for Caribbean tourism today. A few years ago, Member McNeil will recall, the CTO have been trying to look at a common marketing arrangement for the region, and a great effort has been made, and nothing has really materialized from it. But, Mr. Speaker, with the emergence of the sharing economy, or the collaborative economy, as it is called, not only are companies finding that people are wanting to share space and to provide economies from that, whilst engaging more jobs and providing more earnings, but countries are also wanting to collaborate. And we in the Caribbean, particularly in the Northern Caribbean, that is those of us in Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and to an extent Mexico, recognize that we have the critical mass of the Caribbean. Some 70% of all the tourists who now come to the Caribbean come to those 4-5 destinations. But air connectivity, Mr. Speaker, has been eluding us. We haven't been able to attract the large airlines. We haven't been able to get the big distributors to become involved with us. But we believe that if we were able to share resources, if we were able to redefine some policies and some programs to allow for harmonization of certain policies within this space, then we would be able to attract these large distributing agents and be able to bring larger numbers of visitors into the Caribbean. And so, Prime Minister went to a meeting last weekend in Cuba, along with the Attorney General. And we, having had our discussions prior to, was able to, for the first time in the Caribbean, consummate an agreement, sign an MOU with the Cuban Minister of Tourism to commence multi-destination activities in the region. Mr. Speaker, the impact of that is going to be great. And as we speak, the Dominican Republic Minister is in touch, and a similar MOU is about to be signed before the month is out. The Haitian Minister is similarly talking, and we know the Bahamas have been always at it because they have wanted multi-destination activities, and the Mexican Minister also. So, Mr. Speaker, between now and September, a new architecture will emerge in the Northern Caribbean, and a new collaborative approach to tourism management and development will ensue. And we in Jamaica are pleased that we are leading the way in that department. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in targeting their new emerging markets, the JTB will be formulating its approaches to capitalize on the new opportunities presented by the changing global environment, such as the prevalence of the social media, online platforms, and apps. We have mandated the JTB, Mr. Speaker, to leverage social media more effectively in marketing destination while utilizing mega data and analytics to drive our marketing decision. I spoke about the importance of being able to measure in order to manage. And Mr. Speaker, what mega data and analytics do for us is enable us to pinpoint in a more accurate way where the destinations are that are interested in Jamaica. It enables us to determine who is talking about Jamaica. What are they saying about our destination? What are they saying about our products? But most importantly, it allows us to speak back to them in real time. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, nano time, we can speak to them and get our messages across and market in a more targeted way. So the JTB has been instructed to pursue what we call geomarketing, and also to go after content marketing. And this, Mr. Speaker, will provide great economies because it will allow for us to know where we are expending our money, but most importantly, measure the return that we are getting from our marketing expenditure. Mr. Speaker, cruise marketing is now being added to the portfolio of the Ministry of Tourism as part of a strategic move to further boost cruise arrivals. I am pleased to announce that the JTB will be undertaking an aggressive cruise marketing initiative, which will entail intensified efforts to market the destination directly to cruise customers and marketing agents, as well as promoting local attractions and also to drive cruise conversion. And cruise conversion, Mr. Speaker, is a very important aspect of the strategy to build our arrivals, because when the visitor comes for the short period of the cruise, he must be introduced to stop over and to come back to visit Jamaica and to spend a longer period of time. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that TUI AG, TUI, which is one of the largest tour operators in the world and also involved in cruise, has a new cruise ship that will be home porting in Montego Bay, hopefully to arrive in December of this year. This brings, Mr. Speaker, to 4 the number of vessels which will be home porting in Jamaica. Inevitably, Mr. Speaker, a significant number of cruise passengers will stay over for a holiday, facilitating cruise conversion. TUI UK has informed us that an estimated 28% of their cruise passengers who came on Thompson Dream, which home ported in Montego Bay, stayed over for a land vacation. That's the direction, Mr. Speaker, that we truly want to go to ensure that when the cruise passengers arrive, they love the destination so much that they stay over for stopover vacations. Mr. Speaker, we are going to be looking at some new products, the first of which, of course, is the timeshare vacation concept, which this Honourable House approved. But what timeshare will do, Mr. Speaker, is in keeping again with the shared economy, provide an opportunity for a broader demographic and for more people to invest and to participate in the shared experiences that this great destination will offer. Who brought it to the House? You did. Who did the work preparatory to it? I did. And I'm very happy that I am now the one to bring it to fruition and to make it happen.
Prosperity, we say.
So, Mr. Speaker, the United States last year generated some $7.9 billion in annual sales from timeshare activities. And we are excited that this will bring 7.9 billion, yes. And Mr. Speaker, we are excited of the prospects here because it now gives an opportunity for a new type of investment to come into real estate and for room numbers and room counts to increase. Mr. Speaker, another new product that we are going to bring on stream is something that has been in the making for a while, but we have not had a chance to bring it to fruition, and that is artisan villages. Artisan village, Mr. Speaker, provide the opportunity for the small tourism enterprise. The liquor man, the artisan who spends hours, Mr. Speaker, carving out different kinds of creative output through different media. And they, Mr. Speaker, have the unfortunate reality of having to struggle to make a sale. And part of the other problem that they have, Mr. Speaker, is a relative sameness of all the products that are on sale. We want to develop these artisan villages, Mr. Speaker, to create opportunities for the artisan in situ to create his work and to get his prices right there and then. The experience, Mr. Speaker, we've had. And we are not short of seeing how it has been done elsewhere in the world. And so the first one will be in Ocho-Rios, and the second one will be Falmouth, and then we go to Montego Bay and to Negril. And all of those funding, Mr. Speaker, are arranged through the Tourism Enhancement Fund.
Then we come to Kingston.
Mr. Speaker, we will ensure that the experience spreads across the island in due course. Because as the artisans begin to earn more and that the visitors begin to have a better experience, then that will be spread throughout the length and breadth of Jamaica where creativity abounds. Mr. Speaker, I want to move very quickly to destination assurance. Crucial, Mr. Speaker, to the effective development of our tourism product is destination assurance, which, Mr. Speaker, ensures our credibility in the marketplace. It is delivering on our promise. Destination assurance creates guest satisfaction and initiates positive word-of-mouth advertising through our unpaid brand ambassadors who return time and time again to share their experiences with friends and who encourage others to visit Jamaica. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, Jamaica has the enviable record of having the highest level of repeat business in the Caribbean. 42% of every visitor that you see come in these shores have been to Jamaica at least once before. Some have been 50 times, some over 100 times. I was in Negril last week and I saw a couple on the beach and they said this was their 39th visit to Jamaica. They got married here and they have come back every year to celebrate their anniversary. And I said to them, next year when you come for the 40th, be my guest. But, Mr. Speaker, crucial to destination assurance, however, is ensuring safety and security of our visitors. In addressing this pressing issue, Mr. Speaker, and I want to make the point that safety and security is not an issue that is peculiar to any destination. Indeed, it is the most globally pressing concern in tourism today. And some destinations have had the agony of terrorist activities, and others have had criminalities that overwhelm them. We in the Caribbean are still regarded as a zone of peace and the place where most visitors truly want to come. And we have to keep it that way, Mr. Speaker. So in addressing this critical issue, Mr. Speaker, we are collaborating with the Ministry of National Security, and we're going to be spending some effort to ensure that we get the responses right. And Mr. Speaker, the TripAdvisor just did a report which put Jamaica at 26 out of 28 as a destination for safety and security. 26 out of 28. That's painful. As a result, in other words, of 28 destinations ranked, Jamaica ranked 26. Mr. Speaker, that is of concern because in the other experiential rankings that TripAdvisor did, which numbered 12 in all, Jamaica actually slipped one place down to 5 when it was 4 before. But in none of the rankings were we number 1, and that is of concern. And I believe that that drives me to this whole question of ensuring that the experience of the visitor is taken to a new level in this destination. And Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of National Security and the TPD therefore are collaborating to create a new layer of security for the industry. Some 87 district constables are being trained as we speak under this new initiative. And these officers will function under a special arm of the JCF having policing powers, and will focus specifically on boosting safety and security in our resort areas. We will be adding another 13 officers to bring the initial complement to 100 by the end of this year. Mr. Speaker, we are currently fine-tuning details of this new arrangement with the Jamaica Constabulary Force and our stakeholders, because we want also for the private security, which now obtains in the industry, to continue in the private properties that exist. But we want a collaboration and a coordination so that what we are going to really be having is strong security with a smiling tourism face. So that you will see, yes, but you will also feel. And this is very, very critical to us. 15. No?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the member's time be extended by 10 minutes to allow him to conclude his presentation.
The question is that the minister's time for speaking be extended by 10 minutes. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will use the 10 minutes to great effect, Mr. Speaker, but I tell you, we have, in fact, published tabled ministry paper which have all the details of some of the areas that we will be covering. Mr. Speaker, we'll be repositioning the Tourism Enhancement Fund to enable sustained development of the sector and its transformation. For the past 10 years, Mr. Speaker, we've been driving infrastructural improvement and in keeping with the goals set out by the Tourism Master Plan. However, Mr. Speaker, we have to review the way in which the TEF resources have been allocated, and moving forward, we are going to ensure that these funds, which are derived from visitor arrivals, are going to be used for projects which directly enhance the tourism product. Mr. Speaker, to this end, we will be repositioning the business model of the Tourism Enhancement Fund to respond effectively to the demands of our aggressive growing strategy. Mr. Speaker, the agency will fund strategic and targeted projects which support key activities aimed at realizing growth targets. These include supporting the development of the hospitality school, the artisan villages, the craft institute, and boosting safety and security within the tourism sector. Mr. Speaker, the TF will also have a key role to play in funding the activities which will fall under the 5 pillars of tourism growth, as well as the 5 networks. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, a number of projects which are now on stream, those projects we will continue, and the expenditure for them are stated in the ministry paper that we have tabled today. And of course, Mr. Speaker, it will enable Negril and the projects that we have defined in Negril to have full expressions within the period that was determined. Some $209 million have been earmarked for those projects in Negril. In the Montego Bay area, similarly, $399 million for the projects in Montego Bay area. In the Kingston and South Coast area, $135 million has been earmarked for those projects. In the Ocho Rios area, $265 million, and the Falmouth area, $135 million. Mr. Speaker, the new business strategy which we will develop will require MOUs with all key agencies with which TEF partners, and will require a business plan to be presented for projects. These plans will outline the sustainability of each project, the management structure, and the return on investment. And the MOU will differentiate, Mr. Speaker, between projects which have commercial elements and those which are for public good. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that a return on investment is always provided so that the fund can continue to accrete over the years. As part of repositioning, the collaboration, Mr. Speaker, will continue with the UDC and with the Port Authority in building out the portside experiences for cruise and stopover visitors in the main resort areas. Mr. Speaker, I spoke earlier of the 5 networks. And these networks are the gastronomy network, the sports and entertainment network, and the exploiting of our nation's sprinters and our Olympiads. Mr. Speaker, health and wellness is the next network. And all these networks, Mr. Speaker, the details of which I've provided for in the ministry paper, will be buttressed by a special team. And we have brought someone here to the House today who is an eminent professor and one of the leading lights in building out the knowledge network. And we have asked Professor Donald Hawkins. Professor Hawkins? Professor Hawkins is here with us, yes? So, somewhere in the gallery. Professor Hawkins is the Eisenhower Scholar, and he's also the Ulysses winner for the UNWTO, the first. And his work in building out the knowledge network is seminal across the globe. And Professor Hawkins has agreed to come and give us consultancy in building out the knowledge network pro bono. And we want to give him thanks for offering himself in this.
Prosperity.
Mr. Speaker, we'll be promoting investments at all levels. And it is well known, Mr. Speaker, that the small and medium tourism entities, the SMTE, that is those little people in the deep rural who are doing the job to drive new experiences in areas where tourism is not known to be the mainstream of the economy. The areas where, as a result of their herbs and their spices, they can drive new nutraceutical values that will enable new wraps and new oils and new applications for spas. These are little people who are in their craft industry and who are also providing what we call street food, which is a big item also for tourists who come into this country to enjoy their jerk and the other spices that we put together to make our food more delicious and more delectable. These small and medium entities, Mr. Speaker, we are going to be providing funding support for. And we are in process of negotiating a MOU with the Exim Bank. And the Exim Bank, Mr. Speaker, will provide a window for these small tourism entities, the small hotels in West End, the 5-room and the 10-roomers that have a difficulty accessing capital to bring the special experience, the quality experience that the visitor wants in those areas, to make sure that their creature comfort facilities are up to par and that the sanitary and health conditions are also up to par. We are going to offer them that support, and in keeping with our 5x5x5, we will be providing loans for $25 maximum, $25 million maximum, at 5% over 5 years. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with our small taxi operators in the industry, our Juta people, those who have to struggle to refurbish and to bring reliable transportation into the industry, we will be offering support for them to refurbish their stock at a rate, Mr. Speaker, of $5 million times 5 for 5 years.
Prosperity.
So the principle of 5x5 will obtain in this regard. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we have to think of how do we now link the demand that tourism offers to the supplies that are available to make the dollar remain in Jamaica. And while I was minister in the first round, we established the framework, we developed a study, and in fairness, the minister that followed carried through that study. Today we have a document which indicates what the demands are in a number of areas. It's not complete, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't represent the total economic impact of tourism and the economy, but it gives us a beginning in terms of manageable data that we can use to inform decisions and to determine how we allocate resources. This, Mr. Speaker, will show us what the call is in terms of the amount of vegetables that is required to be supplied for the visitor, the amount of fresh fruits that is required to be supplied, the number of beds that is required in the industry, the amount of sheets and pillowcases and so on that are required, and the whole range of items that the industry needs in order to complete the experience of the visitor. And that, Mr. Speaker, if we are able to supply, and that's what the Linkage Council is going to do. The Linkage Council is going to continue to connect with the different sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, and the service sector. And I want to make a point about the service sector, Mr. Speaker, because now, with the technologies at our avail, using the various platforms from this third wave of technology, or the fourth revolution as it is called, we are now able to do much of the marketing work that we used to farm out overseas in Jamaica, because the technology now exists. And we want to encourage our hoteliers and our JTB to begin to access the local services from the technologies that are being provided right here in Jamaica. This will save millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker, and will allow for us to retain more of the dollar. Mr. Speaker, in terms of investment in hotel rooms, we are looking for the target for that 15,000 rooms under the Shovel Ready initiative, which was put together in the past administration, and which we are moving with like the good baton change. We are taking it and moving it to another dimension. And Mr. Speaker, perhaps the biggest announcement from that Shovel Ready arrangement is that later on today, we will sign with Charisma for 5,000 new rooms to be built in St. Anne in Richmond, London. Mr. Speaker, the Vice President for Charisma, Mr. Ruben, is here, Ruben? Ruben is stand, yes. Mr. Speaker, the story behind that particular investment goes back to 2010, when I went to ITB and met with Charisma there. As a matter of fact, the story Ruben will tell you. He was walking around with his suitcase and nobody would talk to him. And he came and we spoke to him. And they outlined what their plans were. And we said, yes, this is exciting. And the first take on it was they were seeking to get Melia, where the Braco, where Melia is today. That didn't quite work out. But the next step, of course, was the Sansitori now that is operating in Negril, and that will be expanded. And future, within the next 5 to 10 years, 5,000 new rooms. Mr. Speaker, China Harbor is on track. And they told me, and the ambassador is here, and we had a discussion on Thursday, and they had originally planned, I think, for 3,000 rooms. They are now looking to put 5,000 new rooms in St. Anne. Mr. Speaker, the Rio Royalton will provide 600 more rooms, H10 development, 1,000 rooms, the Wyndham, 300 rooms, Oceana, 200 rooms, and Mr. Speaker, the Bahia Principe will continue their expansion with another 200 rooms for this year. Royal Decameron will come on stream with 150 rooms. And the Royalton in Trelawney, Mr. Speaker, will have 225 more rooms. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that the time has really gone on us, but I want to make the point about the human development component. Because, Mr. Speaker, no industry can really expand and grow without building out the human capacity. And one of the reasons, for example, that we have not been able to convert much of the wealth that tourism brings is that we also have to build out some top-class managers, sous chefs, and key functionaries in the tourism industry. So that we make sure that we don't have to bring any of those category of professionals to Jamaica. And under our program, and by way, Mr. Speaker, and no, we do, because we understand that, and transfer of technology has helped us in some part. But we have to fast track the process of making Jamaicans own and control the key areas of operation within our industry. And so, Mr. Speaker, we are going to build out the Tourism Hospitality School, which is a must. And we are going to have, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
Minister,
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Bartlett,
Yes, sir.
your time
Yes.
has expired.
Last page, Mr.
Your
Speaker.
time for speaking has expired. You can make your closing
Mr.
remark.
Speaker, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, building out our human capital is the most important imperative of the industry, because the most iconic attraction in Jamaica today are our people. And it is the people why they visit Jamaica. And so we have to build the quality of service and take service to a new level. Mr. Speaker, we have developed and etched an architecture that will drive tourism arrivals to achieve 5 million in 5 years, earning $5 billion, employing 125,000 more workers, and put us, Mr. Speaker, firmly on the road to prosperity. Jamaica can be a tourism economy. We have the means to do it. All we need is the full cooperation of all the stakeholders and you here in this honorable house. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.